He couldn't remember his name. He couldn't remember his family. He couldn't remember what his life was like before he was taken over. The only glimmer of memory he had was from his childhood. People had made fun of him because of his weight. They called him Fatso. He didn't know what it meant, but it seemed to have stuck with him. All he knew the person he had taken over was a very heavy person. He wasn't so sure how much he weighed, but he had so much fat that no attack could do a lot of damage to him. Whenever someone slashed at him or stabbed him, his fat absorbed the impact. Another perk of him being so fat was that he could eat more than any other adult, to which he had so much power over all the other grown-ups. He had consumed so much flesh that he became the top dog. He could command the other two what he wanted to do, and he couldn't even lift a finger. Instead, he sat on his makeshift throne in the middle of Royal Woods High School football field as the other adults gathered bodies, alive or dead, gas tanks, propane tanks, and other flammable objects. They were preparing for a cookout. Barbecue to end all barbecues. They were going to start a huge fire, so big and bright that it would be able to be seen from outer space. Fatso looked over at the kids who were still alive. They were still being locked on cars that hadn't moved closer to the field. The other kids watched the adults gather the bodies through the attentive, dreary, tear-stained eyes. Fatso licked his lips at the thought of chomping down on them, but he had to wait. Wait until there was enough food for everyone to eat. If the adult wanted to join the feast, they had to show up with the bloody of an intact kid. Instead, to distract him, throughout eating kids, Fatso had infected teenagers sitting in front of them. They were all for his personal pleasure. There were 4 of them. All of them had to look to be 17. They were all blonde. He looked telepathically to a girl with a blue tank top pointed at his junk, and she pulled down her gray sweatpants and went to work. Fatso smiled, yelled, as far as the person he had taken control, this disease was probably the best thing that's ever happened to him. The Loud siblings had been having similar dreams for the last week. Lisa was in front of them, reaching out for them, begging for them to save her. They ran as fast as they could, arms extended. But no matter what they did, Lisa was consumed by darkness. There was a whacking sound, which seemed to be like something slammed into flesh, and then she'd reappear with a hole in her head to be covered in blood, her own blood. Luna woke up in cold sweat. She looked down around the gym. It was dark, but the light was beginning to flood through the windows, and as she looked at her siblings, they were all sleeping next to each other. She then thought of how they all behaved last week. Since Luna was the oldest, she had to be strongest member of the family. She had to try to remain them calm down, to try and comfort them. Although she was just devastated as they were, Luann hardly had a single word. It felt like she shut herself out from the world. It reminded Luna of what she did in her mime act whenever she was upset. But the things she used to be upset about were nothing compared to the loss of their younger sister. Now, Lynn was still sleeping, which normally would have been odd since this had been a week before Lisa's death. But now Lynn slept more than normally did, and when she wasn't asleep, she'd go work out vigorously in the school's workout room, harder than she normally would. Whenever Lynn was done working, she'd be sweating, panting, and at the verge of passing out. Her hands would be so bruised and bloody from beating the hell out of a punching bag. Lincoln, all he had tried to cheer his siblings up, even though he was deeply disrepaired by Lisa's death as well. He would really won't talk to anyone either, not even his best friend Clyde. Lucy sat around the room still as a statue. She had been already upset with the deaths of kids who had been killed when the adults got into the school. Now she had the death of the family member, and to add that misery, Lana had both been upset and furious. She constantly mumbled to herself about killing them all, to which caused her siblings to worry about her mental state. Lola had been constantly weeping. She didn't care about her appearance at all anymore. She cried out for her mom and dad, for her older sisters, and for Lisa. They appeared to be in front of her as if she cried hard enough. And then there was Lily, the small, pure, and innocent. She had no idea what was going on, but somehow she sensed her older siblings were sad, which made her sad. At the risk of waking the twins up, they were both cuddled next to her. Luna brought a hand up to the face, and she could just feel it get wet. Luna didn't know it, but she was crying. She lifted her hand away from her face and studied it. In the glow of the sunlight, she could barely make out the wetness from her sweat and tears on her hand. She continued to look at her hand and made her way on the lines on her as the palm and the callus of her fingertips. She brought it back to playing the guitar. Who knew she was going to get another chance to do it again? But before the world went nuts. Her hands were only used to write music and play instruments. Now her hands were for tools of destruction. They were used to wield weapons, take down adults, and break Lenny's leg. Luna quickly brushed that thought out of her head. She focused solely on her hand. She swore that someday she'd go back to making music and make people happy. But the longer she looked at her hand, the more she could sense some blood beginning to appear on it. Lisa's blood. Luna quickly moved her hand away, wrapped it in one of the twins. Luna wanted to go back to sleep, to dream about nothing but a living, long, happy life with her family. Only in her dreams would she be able to be happy, but she wasn't safe in her dreams, because as she drifted off, she saw Lisa standing right in front of her, beckoning her. Luna ran and reached out for her, but as usual, Lisa was engulfed by darkness, and then re-emerged as a corpse. Luna fell to her knees and cradled her sister. "I'm sorry, sis," Luna cried. It was her job to protect her, and she had failed. Now the world was doomed. Duke sat in the auditorium wide awake. The warm glow of the candles gave him a false sense of security. To his right lay Joey sleeping with an axe next to him. All around the auditorium lay the kids. They called themselves the Colts. Duke had allowed them to stay since they were safety in numbers, but large numbers meant more needs, more food, and more water. The Colts had brought a lot of food and supplies with them, but it wouldn't last forever. They have to send more scavenging parties. Some kids were already willing, but others were scared and useless. Duke wanted to bite his fingernails, but he already had nibbled them down to the skin of his fingertips. All he could do was think about the events of last week. They had buried Lisa behind the school as bodies of adults burned a few yards away. There was crying, swearing, and arguing. Everyone wanted to blame someone for Lisa's death. In the end, it had come down to one group, Zeke's group. Everyone called them the Zealots. After the dust settled, Duke decided to go lock in the older one's storage room. The ones who seemed to be down to one group, but of course devoted to Zeke's cause, as the younger ones. It was dedicated that decided that they were innocent, so the group decided not to punish them. In the meantime, Sanjay and some other kids have been hard at work at trying to treat the injured. Some of the kids died, 11 not including Zeke's group. 8 more were injured. Sanjay wasn't so sure if they were going to make it. Then Stan and the older Loud sisters found out about how Lucy and Grace had gone into the school basement and were nearly killed by grown-ups or Greens as Duke tried to push on everyone. They weren't happy. Stan argued that Lucy could have got her and her sister and his sister and many others killed. The Loud siblings were quickly able to shut them down, telling them that Lucy didn't mean for any of this to happen and for him to back off as she was just a kid. Sure, they were all kids, but some were more kiddish than others. But Duke didn't care about what Lucy had done anymore. He cared about when the Zealots were locked up in the storage unit. Duke wanted them to starve to death, but some kids argued that would be too cruel, while the others argued they'd be getting what they deserved. That's when Duke decided on the solution, something they had no choice to do. They couldn't risk any of the Zealots escaping, causing more harm. He had no choice. He was going to have the Zealots executed. Luna was awake again. The light in the auditorium had increased and some kids were beginning to get up. Some of them have passed. They try not to look at Luna or at any of the Loud siblings. But Luna could feel their gaze was sauntered by. Marco and Sarah made no attempt to go talk to Lana or Lola. Grace made no attempt to talk to Lucy. but Maggie still sat near the group. However, Luann's dejected attitude over the last week made her even feel more despondent than she was at middle school. When they first saw Luann arrive, she thought they found someone that she could fit and lift her spirits up. But seeing her sad only made things worse. Part of her was beginning to wish that she stayed at that middle school, but a part of her hoped in time Luann would be back to her cheerful, playful, witty self. Clyde went up to Lincoln and his sisters. Throughout the week he had tried his best to talk to Lincoln and cheer them up, but Lincoln hardly responded to his best friend. Clyde already knew that today would be the same. He wasn't going to give up. "Hi, Lincoln," he said in an upbeat voice, but he kind of wished he hadn't. Lincoln responded with a nod, unenthusiastic. "Hey, how are you feeling today?" he asked, even though he knew the answer. "Clyde," Lincoln just grunted. Clyde looked down at the ground and pondered on what to do. He hated seeing his best friend and his family miserable. He searched for all the therapy that he had endured. He never talked about something like death of a family member, so that was out of his league. "Lincoln, you're my best friend in the entire world. I've been here with you through thick and thin. I'd do anything for you. I'd always be here for you. I know it's been only a week with no amount of time will ever make you forget about Lisa, but what were you doing, Clyde?" "Huh?" Clyde was surprised. This was the most Lincoln had spoken to him all week. "What do you mean?" "When I mean what we're doing? What are we waiting for? What chance is there for us?" Tears began to form in Lincoln's eyes, as just they had all in weeks. His sisters watched, and Luna reached over and put a hand on his shoulder. "I don't understand." "Don't you get it, Clyde? Lisa was our last hope. She was the only person who had been able to stop this disease. Now she's dead, we couldn't protect her. So now what are we gonna do? We're just gonna live in this school for the rest of our lives? Is that all there is? Living off of food scraps, scavenging supplies, killing people who used to look out for us? What's the point?" Clyde was taken aback. He'd never seen Lincoln so down. Clyde then just sat down and told Lincoln to look at him. Lincoln didn't, but Clyde knew he decided to talk anyway. "Lincoln, throughout the time I've known you, I've never seen you give up on anything. So," he said, "how can you compare it to what we've been through in that world that went to hell of what's happening now?" Clyde considered this. "What I'm saying is that you can't give up now. You're Lincoln Loud, the man of action. Always ready, always prepared. I do get that you're upset. You have every right to be. Always be here if you want to talk. Not only me, you still have your sisters who are alive. You're not a quitter, Lincoln. Lisa, Lenny, and Lori, your parents, wouldn't want any of you all to give up. You've got to live, Lincoln. Live for all of them." Lincoln just slightly nodded. "And don't just live for them, but live for those who are still alive." He pointed at Lincoln's other sisters. "Okay," Lincoln said, with another slow nod. Clyde smiled. Small steps, he thought to himself. Soon Lincoln and his family would be back to their fun, animated selves. Stan walked down the hall carrying a bag of food, nothing too fancy, just mostly chips and other random assortments of snacks, as well as a bottle of water. He looked around the hall to make sure nobody else was around, as he soon reached the storage closet. There were two kids leaning against the wall, holding spears, guarding it. Their names were Todd and Clay. They were both the same age as Stan, but not as tall as him. "Yo, Stan," said Todd. "What you doing?" "Nothing. Just need to get something here real quick." He nodded towards the door where they were guarding. They both looked at the door confused. "Why?" "Don't worry about it." "Actually, I will worry about it." Todd straightened up, but Stan had a head's worth of height on him. "These people are here for a reason. So if you want in, you've got to get a darn good reason." Stan just looked over at Todd while Clay stood back, unsure of what to do. Stan held up his bag and a key. "I'm just doing what Duke asked me to do," he lied. "What is?" "Feeding one of the prisoners," he answered. Before Todd could say anything, Stan continued. "There is a pretty girl here, a girl that Duke has a crush on." Both Todd and Clay looked at surprised, and they were still confused. "He only keeps her there because if anyone saw her out, they probably would want to hurt her, and for what the Zealots did to some of the kids here. So in the meantime, Duke wants me to talk to her and warm up to her, gather information about her. Plus she has a little brother who's worried about her. so he wants to ease his nerves and make sure she's all right. Todd looked hesitant, relent to his gaze on Stan. Then why does Duke come here himself? It's too dangerous, so instead his cowardly ass sent me. Okay, fine, said Todd, as he stepped back so Stan could get past. Also, don't tell anyone what I just told you. Duke told me not to tell anyway, but I guess he didn't count on your nosy butts. Todd looked offended, but he nodded. Stan unlocked the door and stepped in the room. Todd didn't even know, but when Stan told him to send him all this stuff about Duke liking Mary, he was actually talking about himself. He took out the small flashlight and flipped it on. He shone it at the back of the room and spotted Mary chained to the wall. She was surrounded by her fellow Zealots, and they looked hopelessly sad. The other kids paid no attention to Stan. They were all malnourished and lost and fought. Stan thought it was cruel that they were doing this to the kids. It was after all Zeke, who probably filled their heads with lies, caused them to kill some of the elementary school students. Stan then couldn't believe it. Kids killing kids. It just seems impossible. Kids shouldn't be killing each other. They should be working together to fight the real enemy. The adults or the Greens, as Duke tried to make everyone call them. Then the other thought entered Stan's mind. They just killed a few kids. Very well, they could have killed all of them, because Lisa Loud was dead, the only person who could have saved the world. Mary barely lifted her head when Stan shone the light on her. She tried to speak, but she was too weak. Stan hurried over to her. Mary, are you okay? He asked, even though he already knew the answer. Stan? Mary's voice was hoarse. Drink this slowly. Stan lifted his water bottle to let Mary take a few swigs. Thank you, she said and sniffled. How's Matt doing? He's fine, although he's worried about you. Mary put her head back down and began to cry. I'm sorry. For everything. I looked up to Zeke. To me, he was a protector. He kept us safe. We thought he'd always keep us safe, but... Stan put a hand on Mary's shoulder. It's okay. I know you didn't mean for any of this to happen. You were just scared. And now the world's doomed, she said, thinking back to what Duke told them once they were all chained up into the wall. He had told them because of them the world was doomed. That girl, a special girl with vastly superior knowledge, was dead. She was the only person who could have found a cure for the disease. Some of the Zealots laughed while Mary was still shaken over what happened. Stan couldn't think of a response while Mary went on. What hope is there? We've ruined everything. I'm going to die. You're going to die. My little brother's going to die. All of us are going to die. That's not going to happen, Stan told her. How do you know? Because as long as I'm around, I'm not going to let my sister die. Same with you and your brother. If we have something to fight for, we'll always be hope. And hope to see my sister and all the other kids at school's lives, full, long lives. Mary wanted to smile, and she loved the confidence Stan gave off, but she felt like she could trust her with him with her life. Now that she had speak him a question that's been so dreading. What's gonna happen to us? Stan had no answer. I don't know. I'll try and convince Duke to let you go. You're no fret, you're just a kid. Mary began to cry again. I'm so scared, Stan. What if anything happens to me? I don't know what my brother will do. Stan thought about his sister, and if anything were to happen to him, how upset she'd be. Don't worry. Like I said, I'm going to get you out of here. Just then the door opened, and the room was filled with more light. Stan instantly stood up and looked back to see Joey entering the room carrying a flashlight with a few more guards by his side. What the hell are you doing here, Stan? Joey asked. I'm just checking our prisoners, making sure they're all here and accounted for. Joey didn't believe him. Really? Because Todd told me that Duke sent you here to check up on certain someone. He nodded towards Mary. I'm just making sure she's okay. Right, Joey said as he lifted his chin up and down. Then he noticed a bag of bottled water. Well, what are you doing down won't matter in a bit, because I've got orders to take these Zealots to the auditorium. Why? Stan asked, sounding unsettled. Because, you'll see, Joey said with a smile. Kill them all. I'm going to kill them all. That's what Lana had been spouting out all week after Lisa's death. Her older siblings thought that she was just venting, but they knew how conspiring with the other kids to sneak out and kill the grease monkey whenever other adult got in her way. She had tried to convince Tom the boy to help her scout out craft the bow when she told him she wanted to kill an adult, but he refused, saying she was just too young to have a bow. So instead, Lana decided that she was going to sneak out with a few other kids to kill a grease monkey without anyone noticing. She just needed a chance. She could get Lola to convince her loyal subjects, as she calls them, to help them with the mission. She held a wrench and stroked it, imagining herself being grease monkey to death with it, and at the end of the day, she'd be the one smiling. Just then, there were shouts coming from the halls. Several kids made their way up to the gym doors to see what was going on, the Loud siblings included. Their blood ran cold when they saw them. Being escorted through the hallway were the few remaining zealots. They looked at their cold, lifeless. At the end of the group was Joey, and Stan standing next to him speaking frantically, constantly asking what did they plan to do with the zealots. "What's going on?" a kid asked. "Duke wants to have a little chat with the killers," Joey called them. "So gather up everyone 13 and older. Have Trini and a few others watch the kids." All the kids started to talk at once, followed the guards. The Loud siblings all looked at each other. "Should we follow them?" Luann asked. "I guess," Luna replied. Then she looked at Lincoln, who stood with the younger Louds behind him. "Lincoln, you stay here and watch Lucy, Lana, Lola, and Lily. We're gonna go guess what's going on." Lisa nodded and led the younger siblings away. "What do you think is going on?" Lynn asked as they showed up. "I don't know. I think something bad's about to happen." Lincoln sat his siblings down. "Why did they let those monsters out?" Lola asked Lincoln. "I don't know," Lincoln told her, and then looked to see his friend Clyde and whispered, "Clyde, I think I can only think of one reason the kids would be out." "Do you think Duke's gonna let them go?" "No, I think he's going to have them executed." Clyde gasped. "What is it? What did he say to you?" Lucy demanded. Nothing," Clyde said with a tremble in his voice. "It doesn't sound like nothing." "Don't worry about it, Lucy," Lincoln interjected. "Now I want you all to stay here with Lily and stay close to Clyde. I have to go do something." Lincoln turned to Clyde. "Can you watch them while I'm gone?" Clyde nodded, with his whole body shaking. "Sure, buddy." Lincoln thanked them and began to walk towards the gym doors. "Wait!" Lucy called after him, but Lincoln just repeated for them to stay put. None of the other kids tried to stop Lincoln. They were too interested in what's going on to notice the white-haired boy. Soon it was just the younger kids and Trini in the room. All the older kids left despite Joey, telling a few of them to stay behind. Lana looked up to where some of the kids were lingering about. She noticed that Timmy, then he noticed her. They were both thinking the same thing. Lana told Clyde that she wanted to go play with Timmy, and brought Lola with her as they both went over with a few kids. "I've got to see what they're planning to do with those kids," Lucy thought to herself. Unfortunately, she had to wait for long during the leave of the commotion. Now Trini was standing next to the door to make sure none of the kids would try to leave. There was also the fact that Clyde was keeping an eye on them. Lucy had to think of something. That's when she noticed a vent cover that was low to the ground. She could easily unscrew all the screws on it and crawl into it. The only question was, how was she going to do it without Clyde or Trini noticing? She looked around the room and that's when she saw them. A short, freckled boy with orange hair. She knew him as Rocky Spokes, and she had a crush on him for once upon a time. But it had been a while since she'd spoken to him and her new friend Grace. The idea in her head, she slowly walked up to Rocky, who was sitting only a few feet away from Grace. They were both trying to read comic books, but she told them their minds were just filled with questions that transpired into the hallway. Rocky had his eyes focused on the comic book. He didn't even notice Lucy crept up to him. "Hey, Rocky," a gloomy voice called out to him, which made him jump. He looked over to see Lucy standing in front of him, with a hint of smile on her face. His heart began to race faster as butterflies filled her stomach. "Oh, hey, Lucy, what's up?" Sweat had enveloped his forehead when, in a matter of seconds, he brought up a hand up to his face. "Nothing," the black-haired girl said, as she put both her hands back and lifted a foot to support it, with the tip of her shoe make it look like she was really interested in the boy. The truth was, she really did like Rocky. It's just she had forgotten about him since the blast, but now she needed him. "I just need you to do me a little favor, if you don't mind." "Sure," he said excitedly. As he closed the comic book, it began to stand up. What you need? You see that boy over there? Lucy said, pointing to Clyde. I need you to distract him for a minute. Why? Just because. How? Lucy thought for a moment and then she had an idea. She told Rocky what to say to Clyde and he nodded. Lucy went over to Grace. Hello, Lucy, she said cheerfully. How are you? Not too good, Lucy answered. Grace frowned. I'm sorry about your sister. I am too. Lucy paused and continued to speak. Anyways, I need you to distract Trini for me, please. Why? Don't worry about it. Just do it. Grace looked confused for a moment. What do you want me to do? Lucy thought for a moment. Just cry, I guess. Sure thing. I'm good at fake crying. It's how I used to get my way with my parents. Grace had a corrupt grin on her face, which made Lucy want to grin too. Okay, you go do your thing. Rocky and Grace got up and went to their unsuspecting chumps. Excuse me, Clyde. Is it? Clyde looked to see Rocky standing up next to him, holding a notebook and a pencil. Yeah, how's it going, Rocky? Good, listen, I'm sorry to bother you, but I heard you used to have a crush on one of the Loud sisters. Clyde's heart sank as he remembered Lori. He had thought about smiling and laughing as she chattered away on her phone, mostly with her boyfriend Bobby, as well as how nice she smelled and angelic her hair and voice sounded, but then he snapped out of it. I sure still do, man, he said. Not even the deaf would stop him from loving Lori. Great, Rocky smiled. I was wondering from a guy who likes a Loud sister like another, if you could help me write a poem for Lucy. Clyde smiled. You came to the right person, my man. Now, Grace just needed to distract Trini. The little girl began to cry and went up to Trini, who was instantly went to full care mode. Grace, sweetie, what's wrong? She said, as she knelt down and rested a hand on Grace's shoulder. I'm scared, was all Grace could say before it began to cry harder. Trini offered Grace the words of reassurance and caressing the acting child. Now it was Lucy's chance. Lana and Lola were talking with a few kids while the others were looking at Grace as she sobbed. Lucy, who looked like a shadow, was making her way towards the vent, quickly unscrewing the screws on the vent cover. Once she was done, she crawled in and placed the cover back to make it look like no one messed with it. Just a quick trip, Lucy thought to herself. Just to get to see what they're going to do with those zealots, and then I'll be back in no time. The older Loud sister stood closer to the stage in the auditorium. Lincoln stood at the back. Standing right beside him was Rusty and Tucker, along with Chandler and Andy. Apparently their curiosity had gotten the better of them too. What's going on? Chandler asked, impatiently. Rusty, can you see anything? I don't know, man. They're all just talking. About what? I don't even know. I can't hear them. Everyone was all chatting excitedly. Most of them were speaking to the person next to them, while others were yelling up on stage. On the stage was Duke, standing tall with his spear in one hand, and right next to him Stan. He seemed to be pleading with Duke, and beside him was Joey, clutching his axe proudly. Also on stage were the zealots, the older kids from the church who had attacked several of the kids from the school. Duke suddenly spoke up and everyone went quiet, except for a few kids who were whispering intently. I'm sure you're all wondering why I brought these killers out on stage. There was some murmuring amongst the kids, but Duke continued. As you all know, we recently got attacked by another group of kids, who were led on by an older kid named Zeke. Some of the kids in the crowd nodded. Because of their actions, we lost 11 souls by their rampage, including by the girl of the name Lisa Loud. Lincoln felt a lump in his throat as he inhaled the sharp intake through his nostrils. At the front of the crowd, Luann sniffled. Luna placed a hand on her shoulder, and Lynn clenched her fists tightly. For those of you who don't know, Lisa Loud was a very, very, very smart girl. Smarter than all of us, putting over 100 times over. There was some more whispering throughout the kids. On the stage were 6 of the remaining zealots. 5 of them were stone-faced and remorseless, except for one who appeared to be crying. It was a girl with dark blonde hair. Lisa was the only person who could have put a stop to the disease, find a cure, but now that day will never come because of these killers. Stan pointed his spear at all the kids, and as they did wish Zeke, the zealot, was alive, so they could execute him in front of his followers as well. But instead he was dead too. Apparently Lisa had killed him by shooting him with a ray gun. Unfortunately, the ray gun was broken because it dropped and cracked and hit the floor. Some of the ray gun was because of their actions, I have decided to have them all executed. The auditorium was quiet for only a fraction of a second. "What?" Stan cried. The cries of terror and cheers from the other kids filled the auditorium. He quickly made his way towards Duke, who held out a spear that was the tip pressed against Stan's chest. He ordered some of the guards to haul him off stage, and then he ordered a few others to bring the prisoners up into the chopping block when they'd been placed on stage. One of the guards unlocked the chains and bound Zealot's wrists. The kid made no attempt to resist as he was brought up to the block. He was too weak to fight. Duke then ordered the kids to hold down as Joey beheaded them. The kids looked at each other. They seemed so hesitant as they were told. Duke rolled his eyes, shoved them aside, and held the kids down. "Any last words?" he asked the kid. "I don't regret what I did. Zeke knew what he was talking about." "Whatever you say." Duke then looked at Joey and nodded. Joey nodded too and readied his axe. He wasn't so sure if the axe was right use for execution, but he'd taken the heads off of the greens before, so it would have to do. He raised his axe, and right as the moans and groans that escaped and gasps from the crowd, it reminded him of a roller coaster when it reached the top slope and was about to go down, and with all of his might he brought the axe down on the boy's neck, a devastating accuracy, completely severing his head. The gasps became cries as the kids throughout the auditorium jumped, screamed, and ran out of the room, or almost passed out. Lincoln stepped off the chair he was standing on to get a better view. His heart was beating fast. "Holy shit, did you see that?" Chandler asked, almost laughing as he turned to Andy. "Yeah, that was awesome," Andy cheered. Lincoln turned to Rusty, who was shielding his eyes with his hands. At the very sight of the blood would cause Rusty to pass out. There was no way he was going to watch this. "Isn't this right?" Lincoln heard a voice said. He looked and saw Tucker shaking his head. "Why are they doing this?" "Isn't it obvious?" Lincoln wanted to shout. "They killed Lisa. Because of them the world is doomed. They deserve this." Tucker looked shocked, but he didn't argue. Not even Lincoln could even believe what he had just said. Even though the kids didn't deserve this, the bottom line was Lisa, their only beacon of hope, was dead. At the front of the crowd, Luna put a hand over her mouth. She looked at her siblings. Luann was crying with her hands pressed against her face. Luna wrapped an arm around her and pulled her closer. Standing right next to her was Lynn, her fists clenched, but she still had to have a satisfied look on her face. It almost looked as if she was trying to smile. While Maggie was standing right next behind Luann, her mouth slightly agape. She wanted to believe what was happening. She was slightly trembling. Her dull passive front was no longer evident. She could see Luann was upset. And if Luann was upset, and so was she. Stan was trying to break free from the kids, who dragged him away, but they were too strong. Ethan and his kids looked around nervously at each other, but not even sure if it was their place to speak up as to what was happening. Ethan then turned to look at his friend named Lexi, who didn't seem to be too bothered by the execution. Duke dragged a few bodies of these a few yards away since no one else would, and Joey emptied the basket that was placed in front of the chopping block to catch severed heads and keep it for rolling away. Duke turned back to the Zealots, who, beside the girl, was a throbbing mess, and sobbing were all expressionless. "Alright, who's next?" "Tag, you're it!" "No, you're it!" Lana, Lola, and a few kids were trying to pretend to play tag. It was part of Lana's plan. A few yards away, Clyde was busy talking to Rocky, while Trainee had managed to get Grace to calm down. Lana was it. She tagged one of the kids that was up to him now, and she ran over to Trainee and touched her. "Tag, you're it!" Trainee smiled soft warmly. "I'm not playing, sweetie." The kids touched her again. "You're it!" "I'm sorry, Cody. I can't play with you right now. I'm trying to cheer Grace up." The kid touched Trainee one more time and screamed as she was it. Then the kids and the others ran out of the gym. "Oh, wait!" Trainee called out after them as she got up and began to chase them. Before she told Clyde, another girl named Penelope came to watch the kids. "Okay," they both said. "That takes care of Trainee," said Lana and the other kids. "Now we just gotta get rid of Clyde and Penelope." She looked over at Lily, who appeared to have a certain look on her face. That face, Lana knew that face. It appeared every time. Lily was about to do something. Everyone in her family had dreaded more than anything. Lana quickly ran over to Lily and grabbed her face, her without Clyde noticing. The sound of Lily's defecating made Lana want to barf. She wasn't grossed out by a lot of things, but Lily's poop was something she feared more than a mud puddle, insect, or booger. All the other kids around Lana held their noses. Lana went over to her backpack to take out a fishing rod, tied Lily's diaper around it, and aimed it towards Clyde. She really hated that she was about to do something terrible, only for her brother's best friend, but she had to get him out of the gym somehow. She bent down her arms, holding the fishing line back, and pressed a button on the rod and sent the diaper flying just as Rocky began to walk away from Clyde. And Clyde was completely showered in feces. What the? He was in shocked and confused, but at first he was quickly overcome with panic and nausea. Rocky stared at him with complete disgust. Whoa! Clyde sat up from his sitting position and then began to cry and scream. What is this stuff? He began suddenly to throw up and ran out of the gym as fast as he could. Rocky also ran out of the gym to try and get away from the smell. Lana was instantly filled with regret. What had she done to poor Clyde? After all he's done for them. She remembered the time that she was stuck in the tree, and Clyde climbed up just to save her, despite being afraid of heights. He also helped Lincoln rescue them when the adults went nuts, and he also helped them keep them safe and escorted them all the way home with Lincoln. Just then another kid ran into the gym. It was one of Lola's royal subjects. Lana, we've spotted grease monkeys outside, and he's still holding your dead pets. Lana's regret was replaced with rage. Clyde wished he could wash himself and get clean, but Grease Monkey was a stain that needed to be eliminated, and she looked towards where Penelope was standing. She then saw that Clyde was covered in poop as he ran past her, which made her sick, so she was busy barfing in the trash can. Okay, she said, let's go. Lana and a few other kids began to make their way out of the gym. Before they left, they checked all the kids that she and Timmy convinced her to join. Lola looked nervous. There was also Stan's sister Sally, as well as a girl named Grace. They were all heading out the door when the voice called out, Hey wait, where do you think you're going? Dang it, said Lana to herself as she looked back at Penelope, who had just finished throwing up, and was making her way towards the bathroom. The bathroom? I'm sorry, but I can't let you leave, she said. If you need to go to the bathroom, then I guess I can escort you one at a... Lana quickly sprang into action. She reached in her backpack and pulled out a rope. Before Penelope knew what was going on, Lana had her hog-tied. Hey, what in the world? Penelope cried out. Sorry, said Lana, but I can't have you get in anyone's way. I'm going to kill that freaking grease monkey, and no one is going to stop me. She then turned to everyone and told them to stay put in her in the gym's storage and hurried up before anyone else saw them. They ran down the hall. Lana was sure she had a wicked grin on her face. Just get out. Kill the grease monkey. Come back in. Simple as that. Sure, her siblings were going to be absolutely pissed when they found out what she had done. But if she had to kill Grease Monkey, then her siblings could help keep her on watch for the rest of the life for all she cared. It would be worth it. They reached for a set of locked doors where Grease Monkey had been spotted. Are you all ready? Lana asked as she reached her tool belt and picked the lock. They all nodded excitedly, except for Lola, who was shaking uncontrollably. Lana noticed this. Don't worry, Lola. Your royal subjects will protect you. That didn't make Lola feel better at all. She was scared, but there was no way she was going to let Lana do this by herself. Her royal subjects would only listen to her. Lana was finally able to get the lock removed, the chains, and secure the doors. They were all greeted by the sunlight. Let's do this! Lana shouted. She took out her monkey wrench and decided to leave her backpack by the door. They weren't going to be gone for that long, and they all rushed out the door and looked around the schoolyard. There! Someone shouted. They all looked and saw a tall, greasy figure standing next to a few evergreens. Grease Monkey! Another kid shouted. Lana tightened her grip on her wrench as Grease Monkey leered at them. She wasn't going to be intimidated. Instead, she rushed up, which prompted the other kids to do the same. Grease Monkey was taken aback by the number of kids. There was around 20 of them, and he and the other adults began to run away. Where do you think you're going? Lana screamed as the Grease Monkey was being chased, along with a few other adults on the street. Lola was screaming for Lana to slow down, but the pounding in Lana's head was too loud for her to hear anything. As they charged further and further away from the elementary school, some of the kids stopped. far too terrified to continue in retreat. Cowards, Timmy screamed at the retreating kids. Lana was too focused on the grease monkey to notice. She didn't care how many kids deserted her. She was going to kill them no matter what. But before she knew it, they were on over 100 yards away from the school. Lana, stop! It's not worth it, Lola continued to scream. Lana turned to her twin. Her face was twisted with anger and confusion and fury. Then leave! Get the heck out of here! I don't need you! I don't need anyone! I could do this myself! Lola and a few other kids were shocked by Lana's outburst. It looked like Lola was about to cry. Lana then realized she was too hard on Lola, but there was no time to worry about that. She had a score to settle, and she looked back and saw Grease Monkey and stopped and was staring at them intently.